to The Mohit Show. Today I'll be covering stories from r/detrans, a well-moderated subreddit for people questioning, desisting, or detransitioning. I will be protecting the identities of these posters since individuals in this community have been harassed when their stories have been discussed. This video's first post, titled, "Anyone else suddenly rethinking everything they believe?" I didn't know until very recently that some clinics are medically transitioning children, and I think it's shocked to me into rethinking my beliefs. My progressive friends and family were unaware of this as well, and are stunned at some of the news that's been coming out. It's led to some changes in some of my views surrounding these topics, and I can't help but think so much of it is just BS now. I feel so guilty because of that, because of my sudden change in views. I just don't think it's about what I thought it was about, if that makes sense. From the comments. One commenter says, "Average straight people don't have any understanding of the intricacies of transgenderism. If you mention the word autogynephilia, they'll have no idea and never even heard of the word, even though it describes the core transition motivation for probably 50% of males who transition." Another commenter adds, "It makes total sense. I think the average person has little to no idea what's really going on. They still think it's we just want to pee and respecting names and pronouns, and not minors medically transitioning and all of the homophobia from heterosexual and bisexual, as in attracted to members of the opposite sex, trans folk who call themselves gay. Don't feel guilty. I get it. It feels like a betrayal." Another commenter adds, "As someone who's been through that, I've obviously changed my views completely on it. I really feel sorry for kids who are going to have to go through puberty blockers. All my friends are like, oh, just let them do whatever makes them happy. I also watched What is a Woman, and that changed my views too. That I was trying to turn myself into something that isn't even possible. The least I can do is spread my story and warn others of my mistakes." Note, I'll be putting a link to the What is a Woman documentary in the description of this video. Another commenter adds, "It makes total sense, and I feel the same way." What's shocking to me, though, is that even sometimes when people see kids being transitioned, it's explained away using the typical playbook. I think there's a large group of people leading the trans movement that do not have a conscience. I don't know how anyone can look at Drag Queen Story Hour and 8-year-old trans kids and think that any of that is normal or remotely okay. It's blatant sexualization of children. I'm shocked it's even gone this far. Another commenter chimes in, "Mom moved to Germany from Nambia before coming to the US. She's half German. And she said there was a fringe movement in Germany in the 70s with the explicit purpose of touching kids and teaching them about sex. They claimed it was to fight capitalism, and she said the scariest part was not the ones organizing it, although it's obvious why they did it. It was the parents that went along with it and gaslit themselves into believing it was for the betterment of society. Top politicians and others were in on it too. I think one even went on to be a top EU politician that was widely praised. The Spiegel has a few articles on it a few years ago. I think some are translated into English. They called the schools Kinderladen, if I remember correctly." Another commenter adds, "It happens all at once. You've seen information inconsistent with your view of the world, and it started to pile up. And then suddenly you notice that your view of what is right and wrong doesn't seem to fit the information anymore. You started off thinking the world hates gays, and it's a lot worse for transgenders who are being murdered every day. Nobody would transition for a bad reason because it's such an unpleasant process. Obviously, any critical headlines about the trans movement are just crypto-transphobia. Trans women aren't trying to rape women in public toilets. Most of them can't even bear to use their penis. Then you realize that some people who you know definitely had dysphoria are detransitioning. They did everything right and they still don't feel like a woman. People say they have internalized transphobia, but you really don't believe that. You notice that, even though your transition is going well, your dysphoria often grows when you pass milestones. You were once ambivalent about your penis, and suddenly you can't live with it anymore. You start to hear about other trans girls who have experienced dramatic changes in sexual orientation after starting HRT. You wonder if that is changeable, then how permanent is gender identity? Suddenly, even though you still have your live and let live attitude, that doesn't seem to answer the question anymore. Sure, people can transition if they want, but what should they want? Who is transition right for? Is it right for anyone? What about kids who can't make decisions for themselves? Why is the trans lobby trying to make questioning a patient's gender illegal? Another commenter adds, in the same spot as you. I used to be what I describe as passively liberal, until I realized half the stuff I was hearing was just factually wrong. I was always bothered by the people I knew saying that I was always a man, despite my intense dysphoria because of the fact that I'm not. I started looking at things more critically, especially trans issues. As the saying goes, changing your mind is proof you have one. You're seeing things from another perspective and shifting what your views are accordingly. That's normal. You're going to be okay. Another commenter adds, that's seriously the danger of educating children on being transgender. There's one thing to mention that there are people out there who are uncomfortable with their sex and prefer presenting themselves as the opposite sex, and they're still human beings who deserve baseline respect. It's something completely different to try and convince kids that they're trans and actively heap praise onto any child who thinks they're LGBT. Another commenter adds, are you okay living in a society where child abuse is routinely practiced? Because it's their kids according to their own ideas. Is there no principle of right and wrong when that comes into play, or is all morality relative? Next post, titled, I'm so furious at everything I just want to scream. I started identifying as trans, male to female, because of social contagion when I was 19 to 20. My younger sibling, who is dear to me, was the first to come out as trans, female to male, though initially as non-binary. And partly because we are so close and partly because we're both in these online communities dominated by trans activists, it just rubbed off on me. It was presented to me as a panacea. I was tempted by the promise of completely reinventing myself, new sexual experiences, and acceptance into a community that rewarded adherence to the cult. What I got was a 4-year nightmare, cutting out all my old healthy social networks, hanging around people who derailed my life entirely, took advantage of me sexually, preyed upon my deepest insecurities, etc. I was just a confused boy who was terrified at the idea of growing up and being a man. Now I'm faced with the problem of how to tell my siblings this. I worry that by telling the truth about myself, I would devastate them. And how the F do I begin picking up these pieces? I'm terrified that I'm now sterile and that nobody will look at me the same again. I'm so angry at the media complex and social circles I came from for enabling this delusion. I just want to scream. From the comments, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I was also affected by social contagion, as was my ex. I think he also was a confused boy with deep insecurities who was terrified of growing up and being a man. These issues are so complicated, and it's easy to repackage any gender nonconformity or aversion to being a man or a woman, or our sex, or stereotype perceptions, etc., etc. It's much more complicated than I can put into words in one comment. Next post, titled, if one more trans person tries to tell me that I didn't suffer from gender dysphoria, I'm going to scream. Yes, I did, sad internet stranger. I suffer from these issues as much as you did. Sorry I make you feel insecure about your transition. Sorry my very existence offends to the point that you have to try to downplay my suffering in your brain. I'm still not going to stop talking about how gender ideology has harmed me. A gender dysphoric person. Deal. From the comments. It's crazy how solidified the dysphoria means you must transition for forever pure trans joy or else kill yourself narrative has gotten when you take a step back and see the issue from a wider angle. Turns out the thing people want to be simple but have no reason to believe is actually not so simple. Weird, ain't it? Some people's grammar. Another commenter adds, don't engage with them or their politics. They're not willing to critique or analyze their own brand of ideology, and it's nearly impossible to have genuine discourse with these people online anyways. Next post, titled, do you think that men being seen as violent and evil favors transsexualism? When I was a kid, family and people around me, especially women, taught me that men are evil, violent, and that old men are ugly and shouldn't be seen as an example, that men are inferior to women and less smart than them, and that all male will be raper or pedophiles. I honestly think this rhetoric really made me feel insecure about my gender identity and that other detrans males may have passed through this. From the comments. Hearing it over and over again from aunts was definitely part of it for me, even though mom tried to keep them from doing that in front of me and argued against it. But also attraction to men in my case and being feminine. Being trans to socially fit in more with girlfriends seemed to be a huge part. In the end, I didn't truly want to change sex. I just didn't want to be me, and part of detransitioning was picturing myself as another man, then a better me. Picturing myself as an adult woman, I think, was to deal with the internalized misandry, homophobia, etc., and believing bisexuality plus effeminacy was strictly for women, plus wanting to skip the rest of my teens. It started a bit before puberty for me, as I was already different. Another person says, it's a big part of it for many, yes. Feminism is a great contributor of both the trans mask, feminist, and incel pipeline to male to female. Many male serial killers actually also grow up in very feminist or women-dominated households. A commenter replies to this comment, I never would have believed that once. But from reading extreme feminist forums where they talk about their own male children and make them out to be ticking time bomb rapists/murderers, I think it's possible. Although I think some male serial killers are just predestined due to brain chemistry fuck-ups from infancy. Having a mom or dad that hates you just because you're a boy or girl seems so horrid to me. Why have kids if there's a 50-50 chance you'll hate them just for what they are? That's like the KKK playing adoption relay. I think male kids need a good role model to help them handle their testosterone in productive ways. Another commenter adds, I believe that this was the source of my personal gender dysphoria. Due to the nature of my upbringing, I suppose I absorbed the message that men are the baddies. As a teenager, I looked out into the world and had many of these fears confirmed as true in many respects, and that made it so much more painful. It made me fear and detest men, and I guess I subconsciously looked for a way in which I could escape becoming one. As all of us in this sub know, that wasn't the right path to a better or healthier life. Sometimes you just have to accept that you lost a coin flip and do whatever you can with what you have. Another commenter adds, yes, that men are seen as bad, that it's frowned upon for a man to be feminine and with feelings. Let no one defend fragile men. Let them laugh if a man is afraid. I follow? Being a man is not a privilege for many of us, rather the opposite. Another commenter adds, not wanting to be seen as a threat to women was a major motivator in my identifying as transgender and in starting HRT. I like being friends with women more than men, but I hated being seen as an outsider and always being assumed to be sexually motivated. It really hurt. I wanted to be seen as at least not a danger and as best, maybe one of them. Next post, titled, I just realized that I'm not trans and I actually feel more confident in myself. Back when I was trying to transition, I felt like I had to convince myself that I was trans. I felt like I had to force myself to think that I was a man, and I didn't have a lot of gender dysphoria, if any at all. I read all these posts saying you can be trans without gender dysphoria, but realized what happens to the people who undergo surgery without any dysphoria? You messed up your body and did an irreversible change just because someone told you that you could? After spending a week at a confidence camp with all girls, I realized that I wasn't trans. I just didn't love myself. I thought that if I was a man, I looked nicer, and everyone would love me. But I had to love myself. And I'm surprised nobody told me to think about what I was doing. But I'm also so happy I figured this out myself. What I realize now is that I'm just a lesbian cis female, and that's totally fine. I don't need to be a man to date girls to be liked. Sure, I can be a tomboy, but I'm just not a man, and I'm happy the way I am. Next post, titled, People need to start treating men with some humanity. Too many people seem to think it's fine to paint men as rapists and murderers. I've been downvoted plenty of times for not being wanted to be associated to effing monsters because of my sex, something I never even asked for. People cry about how unfairly they were treated as women, then proceed to talk about men as if they're guilty of some of the most horrific crimes you can commit against others just by association. Why can't people see this kind of S that drives us away from our identities at birth to begin with? They're hypocrites, and I'm done being nice to people who can't even treat me and other men on this forum, many of whom struggle with being viewed as dangerous by others for merely existing, with some effing humanity. Next post, titled, I've completely changed my self-conceptualization and it's so nice. I thought I was a physically disabled, autistic trans woman working in healthcare and converting to Judaism. Once a woman part fell out of it, cast everything else into question. So I started treating doctors like helpers instead of gatekeepers, started talking more earnestly with my rabbi, just in general opened up to the idea of being wrong. The disability got a proper diagnosis and was resolved. My autism was re-diagnosed as social anxiety plus ADHD and properly treated. I'm going back to school for a different field, and I stopped converting and am now looking into paganism. This has entirely changed my life, which I kind of hate because I'm tired of making permanent changes. But it has left my life so much better off, like engaging with hobbies I thought were unfeasible, and growing stronger and better at my job social life, levels of improvement. How has your experience been with this? Anyone had this happen too? From the comments, I totally understand. It's almost like waking up from a religion that's gripped you. You realize you have an option to have a life outside of the religion. You have the option to just live, freely, like everyone else, without all this extra belief that really is just noise in your brain and you're inflicting on yourself for no good reason. It's a relief to wake up from that and realize you can just be like everyone else, live like everyone else, and not subject yourself to a conception that isn't even physically real. I've even misgendered myself. I didn't have to live in fear of my own thoughts. You can just live truth, not a truth. On the note of religion, I noticed many people who become disabled, autistic, gender non-conforming, trans women, vegetarian, LGBT, BBQ tend to convert to religions like Judaism and Islam. Not targeting you, but your story reminds me of this phenomenon. I get the sense that they want to collect oppressions. Essentially, as the leftist religion or worldview / way of thinking, if you like, suggests that you go to heaven if you are oppressed. Essentially. The leftist equivalent of being virtuous slash heavenly is being oppressed. So many of the people who develop the mindset you describe coming out of tend to pick minority religions to enhance their oppressed status. Just thinking out loud here, feel free to disagree. Next post, titled, Is anyone else feeling alienated because of the current gender discourse? I don't know. I keep wondering if I'm the one who's wrong about all this. What if I really am the one who should educate myself? So many people are accepting the idea of infinite genders now, and that we should respect everyone's identities no matter what. I've always had it in my head that most people don't actually agree with this stuff but go along with it. I'm not so sure anymore. So many people who used to be completely reasonable now defend those ideas. Meanwhile, I've become more critical. I can't tell if I'm the rational one or just closed-minded now. I was going to say so many more things, but I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to know if some of you can resonate with this. I'm feeling very lonely with these thoughts right now. From the comments. One commenter adds, sometimes I feel like that, yeah. But then I remember most people really don't think that hard. Like they really truly don't. They go along with it because they think supporting gender stuff is an easy way to say, I'm a good person. They hear, I'm not a girl because I don't feel like a girl and don't wear makeup and dresses. And they go, you're valid. What are your pronouns? But I ask them, do you feel like a girl or boy? And most will say, no, I just feel like myself. Ask them, do you think girls cease to be girls if they dislike makeup and dresses? And most will say, of course not. Girls dress however they want. And yet none of them will make the connection, because most people really never think that hard. It's honestly really annoying because you can see that contradiction and yet they just don't have enough brain cells to arrive at, oh, that makes no sense. A commenter replies to this comment, yeah, it's a hive mind. Gender isn't that personally important to most people, so they've never thought about it with that much depth. So when it seems important to other people, they're fine with going along with what they're told. But it's not important to me, so I'll just follow the leader, is exactly how things get effed up throughout history. Another commenter adds, the whole discussion is politicized to its stupid degree, on both sides, and developed into a platform for people to push their own agendas rather than actually wanting to help people. It also scares me how cult-like behavior, like cutting yourself off from people in your life with different viewpoints and punishing dissent, has become so commonplace in everyday society where people can't even ask questions without accusations of transphobia or people wanting to shut down further research. Funny thing is, when I was female to male, I used to be terrified of this thought. That everyone just went along out of pressure but didn't really buy it. That they were indulging me like a difficult child. It made me feel so patronized even though they were doing exactly what I wanted. Coming clean about desisting was far more embarrassing exactly because I felt I'd been goading everyone to make an effort for me and educate themselves. And now I was actually like, never mind, I've been a girl all along, everyone can drop it. It's been years and it still stings to think about. And another commenter adds, if you mean gender-like personality, sure. What that has to do with sex? Not so much. Personality shouldn't be weighted against what sex you are. Most people today are just going along with it because we go along with groups as humans. They know nothing about it. Now today's last post, titled, I'm an Anomaly. Detrans woman, 2 years off T. My voice has gotten slightly higher, but it's still deep in the male range. I'm working in an elderly care unit, and I've never felt more like a gross affront to God. My voice ruins it all. My voice confuses the elderly to a point where I repeatedly get the question, are you a girl or boy? Is that a girl or a boy? They'll say in the background, like I'm not there, like I'm not a person, I'm an it, I'm an anomaly. I love my work. Please don't get me wrong. I would die for my patients. This job, however, has highlighted just how badly I effed up my body. I won't get the privilege again to be viewed as a woman. I don't get that anymore, because I threw it away. Dramatic? Yes. In a pit of despair with the slightest chance of crawling out? Also yes. I will be getting help to reverse most of the effects. It's on the way, but the way there feels impossible to traverse. I'm an outsider. I do not belong. My whole mission with transitioning was to belong. And what did that achieve? Nothing. I'm experiencing the exact same thing all over again. I'm fighting for my rightful place in society, which I won't get because I threw that chances away. I'm an anomaly and I genuinely have never felt such regret for my mistakes. My heart is drowning in its own pity. Makeup isn't enough. Realistic tit inserts isn't enough. It's all because of this effing voice. And that will be all for today. Thank you for watching. Please have a good day.